Okay, welcome back to another episode of Third and 23. I'm your host Alex, here to talk college football, specifically Week 5 of the NCAA season coming up tomorrow. Technically, I guess you got some games tonight, but as you guys know, I only discuss Saturday games. It's pick and prediction time. So, without further, before I get into it, as I always say, these picks are for entertainment purposes only. Now, I follow my own. I practice what I preach, right? So if I'm putting it out there and I'm saying that this is a game that I'm gonna do against the spread, or if it's a game just looking at overall, it's a game that I'm actually putting myself out there and I'm doing on my own. If you guys decide to follow my picks, feel free. That's why I'm doing this. But do so at your own risk, I guess you say, right? Because it's all your responsibility. So, without further ado, let's get into it. As you see in the top right, you'll see what my overall record is as far as picking games straight up. And you got my against the spread record there as well. So, not doing too bad this season. It's been a good year so far. So, if we can keep it going, man, let's get it, man. Let's get money time, right? So, let's get into it. Let's start off with Clemson and Syracuse, right? So Clemson coming off that 31-24 loss to Florida State, where they really outplayed them for the majority of the game, outgained them pretty tough, outgained them by a lot, ran the ball well, threw the ball well, just made mistakes, critical errors, coaching errors, really cost them that game. And now Clemson is sitting at 2-2 with 2 losses, by the way, in the ACC. So that says something about their chances of getting to the ACC championship game. Syracuse, on the other hand, this is their ACC opener. They're 4-0, but they haven't really played anybody. They blasted Colgate, Western Michigan. They grounded out a win against Purdue, and they kind of grinded out a win against Army. Well, they're kind of sluggish in a win against Army. Army scored on like the last seconds of the game to lose by 13. They were really down by like 20. But anyway, so that's where we're sitting at in this first game. By the way, if you're new to this, so the spreads that you see on your screen are what the spreads were at the beginning of the week. I like to show how the action has moved throughout the week, and I'm going to update these spreads. Here real time. So starting out with Clemson Syracuse is open at 6.5 for Clemson being favored, and this has now moved to, I want to say moved to 7 because I looked at it earlier. Yeah, it moved to 7, so the action has been on Clemson. Kind of interesting to me because if you know the history in this series, the last 2 games in this series and nail biters. Clemson won them both, right? What they won? They won 27-21 and they won 17-14 the last 2 years in this game. Nail biters. And this Clemson team is actually weaker, in my opinion, than the 2021 or 2022 version. And Syracuse, they haven't played anybody, but Garrett Schrader, man, this guy's been in school for like 100 years. He makes plays running the ball. He's a great runner. He's never been the most consistent passer, but he's a great runner, and he's doing it again this season, running the football. Against Army, he did look good throwing it, but that's Army, so I'm not going to really count that. Two things to note with Syracuse. One, Oronde Gadsden is like an all ACC type of tight end. Great player. He's out for the year, unfortunately. Great players. Sad to see him go down. But another thing to note is Syracuse's run defense has been stonewalling everybody. Now, they ain't playing anybody, but they've been stonewalling everybody. Clemson strength maybe is running the ball, but I really like Cade Klubnik. I think he's growing week by week. He's looking good. He's growing. I think he's good enough certainly to move the ball through the air against Syracuse. Syracuse's pass defense is not going to be something that's locked down, right? They're never going to be that at Syracuse. They're not going to have those kind of athletes. But the run defense has been balling. Garrett Schrader is the legitimate baller with the ball in his hands. And I'm saying all of this, I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm taking Syracuse straight up, because I'm not taking Syracuse straight up, but I'm going with the history in this one. These teams have played tough and tight. The Clemson coaches, I'm not talking about Dabo Swinney, I'm talking about the coordinators. They've left a lot to be desired so far this season. They got to pick it up. And Syracuse just somehow, they have Clemson's number. I mean, they keep it tight. They keep it close in this game. Garrett Schrader is definitely good enough to make plays against this Clemson I mean, Clemson's defense, I really like their players, but he's going to make plays against them, man. You're not going to stop an athlete like this for 60 minutes. You're just not going to. So he's going to make plays. He'll probably make some ad-lib kind of plays, and he's going to keep this close. This is an against the spread pick that I'm taking. I'm taking Clemson straight up, right? I'm taking Clemson straight up, but I am taking Syracuse with the 7. Syracuse a touchdown at home. I'm taking that. I'm taking out the 7-0 lead to start. All right. USC Colorado's up next. USC, this is really interesting, the fact that this is a noon game, out there on the West Coast. That's kind of surprising. That's a noon game. I mean, I guess it's mountain. Colorado, I guess it's mountain time, but still, that's like, what is that, 9 a.m. out there? Or I'm sorry, 10 a.m. out there? Like, that's kind of weird. But anyways, Colorado coming off about the most, coming off that embarrassment that Oregon did to them. Everybody was watching. What people forget is Oregon is just a different animal than Colorado's played this season. They still are 3-1 on the year. They've had a great start to the year. They played, some people will say, their first real opponent, but they beat the defending national runner-up in the opener, and then they beat up on Nebraska. I think Nebraska stinks, but they beat up on Nebraska. They beat Colorado State, who's not very good, but that game kind of exposed some things in Colorado, and that their defense just really their defense is a problem. Their defense is not very good. And you're going against Caleb Williams and this USC offense right now. That's not a recipe for success. I mean, I'm absolutely taking USC to win this game straight up. This started out at 22.5, but it has actually come down to 21.5. So some action out there on Colorado. I guess some people think they're going to keep it close. Maybe they're looking at the Arizona State game last week. USC kind of skated by Arizona State. They kind of caught everybody. If you stayed up and watched the game, it was late at night. Arizona State was making plays, and this running back, Cameron Scattaboo, this guy's just a football player. Running, catching. He threw like 2 passes. He completed like 2 passes for like 50 yards. Breaking tackles. I mean, dude was looking like, think Toby Gerhart for Stanford, if you guys remember him from some years back. That's what this guy looked like. This guy was balling. He was giving USC a problem. The problem for Colorado is they have no running back. They have nobody like this on their team that's going to do that. So if they're going to make plays in this game, they got to do it a different kind of way. It's got to be Shedeur Sanders making plays against the USC secondary with his Colorado receivers. And he can do it. He can make plays in this game where I think they're going to score. They're not going to get 42-6 in this. They're not going to get embarrassed like that. But USC is a lot better than these guys. Their offense is just more explosive than Colorado's. I could see this kind of being a high-scoring game. I also see USC winning by double digits. I'm not going to lay 21.5 on the road, though. After Coach Prom got embarrassed a week ago, I expect these guys to come out focused, still lose, but come out more focused and keep this a game. Keep this competitive enough for a while. So I'm going with USC straight up, right? So we're going USC straight up on the road, but I'm not doing this game against the spread. 21.5 on the road. I'm just not gonna do. Sorry. All right. So I'm not gonna do that game against the spread. I recommend not doing it. But overall, if you were trying to throw on a money line, it'd be a game you could consider. I'm definitely taking USC straight up, though. All right. Next up, Florida, Kentucky. So people probably don't realize is Florida's actually ranked. Nobody's really been paying attention to Florida, despite the fact that they beat Tennessee, who was ranked number 11 a couple weeks ago. They beat Tennessee. Coming off a big-time letdown the next week against Charlotte. Florida didn't really, wake up for that game. They won 22-7. It was ugly. But like I've always said, letdowns in college football is a real thing. I've said it many times. It just is. So I don't expect that, that was kind of expected, right? I mean, that's a game. Man, I'm throwing that out. That game doesn't matter to me. What does matter is the fact that, oh, and before I continue, this started as Kentucky, despite Florida being ranked. Kentucky's favored at home by 1.5 is what it opened at. Now it's down to 1. So Kentucky, actions on Florida. Kentucky's a 1-point favorite. So here's things but you know about Florida. Florida's defense is for real. It's a huge turnaround from a season ago, from the past couple seasons. Their defense with this new DC, Austin Armstrong, he's doing a great job getting guys in position, alignment. Everything is been working for Florida. They've been great against the run. They're stout up front. But they've been good against the pass too. I mean, you can hit plays on these guys. If you got a better athlete than them or you got a better player than them, they can get plays. But consistently, nobody's really been able to get consistent plays against Florida this year. Kentucky, on the other hand, Kentucky is sitting at 4-0. They waxed Ball State. They got by Eastern Kentucky in an ugly game that I don't think they really were awake in. Akron, they beat up on Akron, and then they beat Vandy last week 45-28. A game they had a couple pick sixes in. Without the pick sixes, maybe this is more of a game, but Kentucky was in complete control in that game. They're led by Devin Leary. Devin Leary, if you guys remember, he used to QB at NC State. Last year at NC State, or 2 years ago at NC State, he got all this hype because he was looking good. I'll give it to him. He was looking good. Last year, he's coming in with all this hype in the 2022 season. Man, he's not looking that good. Nobody wants to say it. I'm going to say it. He wasn't looking that good. Then he eventually ended up getting hurt. I think got hurt against Florida State game. The backup quarterback comes in, MJ Morris, freshman. And honestly, man, he was looking kind of better than Devin Leary. I'm not sure what made Devin Leary transfer, but MJ Morris could have been the reason. Maybe he thought, hey, maybe I might get my job back. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if that's the reason. All I know is he didn't look that great. He transfers to Kentucky. He hasn't looked that great this year. Against Vandy, he threw 2 picks. One was he threw some BS out there in double coverage deep downfield instead of looking for anything underneath, and he threw it short anyway. Like, it was just a bad throw. His other pick, he got hit as he threw. I mean, I'm just not like a big Devin Leary guy. I don't think that he has the best feel at quarterback. I don't think he makes the best plays. And I think that he's going to be in for some trouble in this game against a Gator defense that, against another QB 2 weeks ago against Joe Milton in Tennessee, he kind of exposed. Joe Milton, yeah, he had some plays in the fourth quarter going downfield, but he wasn't making as many plays as he should have been making to keep Tennessee in that game. Devin Leary, I think he's kind of comparable to Joe Milton, if not worse than Joe Milton. The running game for Kentucky with Ray Davis, I like Ray Davis a lot. I don't know if he's going to make the find a lot of running room in this game against this Gator defense that's really big up front. On the other side, I think Kentucky's defense, they figured out Billy Napier last year and shut him down. They're not going to, and that's with Anthony Richardson, who was a top 5 pick. Going against Graham Mertz and these guys, I expect Kentucky's defense to really shut down Florida's offense for the most part. I think they're going to be able to stuff the running game for the most part. Florida might hit some runs because they do got some good backs. Graham Mertz, unless these guys are going to open up the passing game, Florida's passing game is pretty much, dink, 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 right? They just throw short passes. Nothing really goes past 10 yards for the most part. That's just how they play, right? So this is going to be a defensive slugfest, in my opinion. This is going to be a game decided by turnovers, in my opinion. And Kentucky is a team that I believe is more susceptible to committing turnovers than Florida. So in an upset, according to the Vegas line, but not by the rankings, I'm going with Florida. I'm going with Florida straight up here. So that's another against the spread pick. So we got 2 so far. Syracuse with the +7, and I'm taking Florida straight up. Moving on to Texas A&M, Arkansas. Arkansas coming off a 34-31 game against 34-31 loss to LSU, where KJ was doing KJ things. KJ is just a playmaker, man. He makes plays. He's a baller. He'll go downfield. He can take off running. He doesn't have the best help around him, but he manages to make it work. I like KJ Jefferson a lot. He's a really good player. Rocket Sanders, who I've always said is probably the best running back in the country. He's unlikely to play yet again. I don't know if Rocket Sanders is ever going to play again this season. But without Rocket Sanders, this week against the Texas A&M defense is better than LSU's defense, in my opinion. I think things are going to be a lot harder for Arkansas. I don't see them putting up 31, that's for sure. So things I think for the Arkansas offense are going to be a lot harder. Texas A&M on the other side, they're going with Max Johnson at quarterback. I don't know if you guys heard, but Connor Wegman got lost for the year, unfortunately, in that Auburn game last week. Now, I said it in my recap video that I'm a big fan of Max Johnson. I always have been. I thought he was a good quarterback at LSU. I thought he's a good quarterback. I think he's a good quarterback at Texas A&M. I think he's good enough to be a starting quarterback at a lot of schools. Now he's getting his opportunity to start again due to injury, of course, which is unfortunate. But I think that Texas A&M shouldn't miss a beat when it comes with with starting Max Johnson. The running game started to look a little better last week against Auburn. I still think they need to figure out who's going to step up at the running back position. A&M wide receivers are legit. So that's going to be a big problem for Arkansas, who got cooked by LSU last week. So, by the way, this game opened at 7. Sorry for not making a change. Sometimes it just slips my mind. But this game opened at 7, and it has now gone down to 6, maybe with the news of Connor Wegman, but I think that's a huge mistake. Because if you've been watching, Max Johnson is a good quarterback. With it going down to 7, Texas A&M made you sweat last week to cover, but they covered. I'm going to go with Texas A&M again overall, and I'm going to go with Texas A&M to cover that 6 as well. So, we got 3 against the spread picks now, right? Syracuse with the 7, Florida straight up, and Texas A&M covering that 6. On to Georgia and Auburn. So Georgia, as I've said many times, they've started out games slowly. They started out slow against UT Martin, blew them out. Started out slow against Ball State, blew them out. Started out slow against South Carolina, and we're actually down 14-3 at the half. Dominated second half to win 24-14, and really gave Spencer Rattler a lot of issues in that second half. And then against UAB, they dominated UAB. And so, their schedule hasn't really been that tough. Auburn isn't a tough team either. I mean, South Carolina might be better than them. I thought South Carolina was the worst team in the SEC. I could have been wrong about that. But, they're not very good, and neither is Auburn. Auburn might be the worst team in the SEC for all I know. This did open up at 14.5. This has gone to no, actually it's still 14.5. So Auburn, they had trouble moving the ball last week against A&M. They cleared 100 yards of offense at some point in the fourth quarter. It was so difficult for them. Before the season, I thought Georgia and Texas A&M would have the best defenses in the SEC. I still believe that. I know the Miami game had for A&M, but I just think that was a dud, right? I think that Auburn is about to have another rude awakening with a very difficult defense. I think Georgia's probably going to be able to move the ball better than A&M did, especially in that first half. A&M was struggling. I think Carson Beck is really in a groove. I think that Auburn has absolutely nothing to keep pace with these guys. Yeah, they're at home, but I don't think the crowd is good. They're at home, but I don't think this is a game where the crowd is going to make much of a difference. I don't think they're going to keep them in it against Georgia. Georgia might start slow. This is a rivalry game, but I don't think it's going to last. I think Georgia's definitely good enough to win by 17, and I'm doing this one as well. I'm doing quite a few against the spread picks right now, taking Georgia, and I'm laying at 14.5. All right, let's move on to Kansas at Texas. Now, this is a dangerous game here because Kansas is a very sneaky good team, right? They're a team people don't pay attention to. Jalen Daniels did miss some games this year, but he's been back the past couple weeks. These guys put up points. These guys do put up points. They're pretty athletic on the defensive side of the ball. They forced a lot of turnovers. Last week they had two defensive touchdowns against BYU. Huge hit for a fumble return for a touchdown by the DB Kobe Bryant. Absolutely smoked this guy. If you haven't seen it, go on YouTube and watch what he did to this BYU player. They also had a pick six in the game. They've been tested too. Illinois, BYU. They played some competitive teams, teams that you would think are competitive, and played really well in them. I think Jalen Daniels is a good game managing kind of quarterback. I don't think he's a game breaker in any sense, but they've got running backs on that team with Henshaw and Devin Neal, and these guys are pretty good on that side of the ball. I think the 16-point spread is kind of steep, and I'm a big fan of Texas. You guys know I got them in the college football playoff. Quinn Ears and Xavier Worthy, Jonathan Brooks, sneaky good running back. But this could be a competitive game. This is a game that I'm definitely not going to do this against the spread. I'm not going to do this game. I think Texas is going to win because they're at home. But if this is on the road, man, this would be on upset watch, to be honest with you. I still wouldn't pick it against the spread, but it'd be on upset watch. But I'm going to take Texas at home. I'm not going to do this against the spread, though. I'm going to leave that alone. LSU Ole Miss. So Ole Miss is coming off a loss to Alabama. Most people are going to say that's not an embarrassing loss, but I'm going to say it's an embarrassing loss because this is Alabama's worst team since Nick Saban's first year, right? And Lane Kiffin still couldn't beat them. And not only couldn't you not beat them, you only scored 10 points. And that secondary gave up work to Texas. Only scored 10 points. You started out up 7-0, and basically the game was over because you got dominated the rest of the way. The Ole Miss is coming off of that embarrassment. I think that their defense was giving up plays. That game actually could have been worse. Jalen Milroe had some mistakes down in the red zone. They could have lost that game by about 21 points or 21 to 24 points. They're just absolutely dominated in that game. I think Ole Miss's defense is only okay. It's definitely not good enough to slow down its LSU offense, which is in an absolute groove. I think with Quinshon Judkins not being able to run the ball yet this season, it's putting a lot of pressure on Jackson Dart to execute passing. I think Jackson Dart is a good quarterback, but I don't think his receivers, Dayton Wade and these guys are replacing the dudes from last year who moved on, right? And they were explosive last year. These guys just flat out aren't as good as the guys they had at wideout last year. Jordan Watkins, Dayton Wade, these guys just aren't. They just flat out are not as good. And without Quinshon Judkins there to provide some relief in the running game, I mean, he's playing, but he's just not doing anything. It's putting a lot of pressure on Jackson Dart. And this Ole Miss offense, they saw it last week, their first big test at Alabama. They had 10 points. Here's another big test, man. And you're at home, and this is at home in a night game, right? And by the way, this stayed at 2.5. And, before I lose it, that Texas game stayed at 16. Sorry about that. But you're at home. It's a night game. And that's really the only thing Ole Miss is going for them. It's a night game at home. You guys know how SEC night games, they just seem to be a different animal sometimes. But sometimes I think it's just the team that they're playing against makes it look like they're a different animal. Ole Miss is a team. If we look at 2 weeks ago, Tennessee went to Florida in a night game, and that crowd was rocking, and Florida won, and it seemed like the crowd drove Florida that win. But if you look closely at Tennessee, they're not the same explosive offense that they were last year either. They replaced a lot of guys, too, on the outside. And while Brew McCoy can still work, and then Hooker's not there, and Joe Milton was missing passes downfield to guys. He had a touchdown. He missed. Could have got the game really tight. So here we go. Ole Miss, not the same as last year. They don't have the same receivers, and these guys don't really look like game breakers. That LSU secondary is not strong. I told you KJ Jefferson was going to do work last week, and he did just that. He did work. Jackson Dart could do work, but I don't know. And he could make, and he can make some plays, but I don't know if he could do enough to win the game. And you already know Jaden Daniels, this offense, they're going to come in here, and they're going to go to town. They're going to go to town on this Ole Miss defense. I think Ole Miss is going to win some games this year, but this isn't going to be one of them. I'm taking LSU, and I'm actually going to lay that 2.5. I'm going to say LSU can go ahead and win this game by 3 on the road in Oxford. All right. Notre Dame, Duke. This is an interesting game. It's a game, I don't know if Notre Dame's ever even played Duke before. Notre Dame opened at 4.5. The action has been all over Notre Dame. It's gone up to 6. And that tells me that a lot of people don't know about college football is the letdown factor, right? Or maybe they think it's going to be the bounce back factor, right? Notre Dame coming off a huge game against Ohio State. Super tough loss at the final second. Then how do you get up and now you got to go on the road to a very dangerous Duke team that people still sleep on, and they're probably you could make the argument they're a top 4 team. I mean, I'll make the argument they're a top 4 team in the ACC, if not top 3, right? Hell, they might be the best team in the ACC. We don't know yet till it's all said and done. So to go on the road and to go up from 4.5 to 6, you don't got a receiver. Duke's secondary is where you can make plays at. That's where you can make your money, because you can make plays against the Duke DBs, but you don't really got receivers like that. So, I mean, I don't, that's not their weakness isn't really going to be a strength for you in this game, right? You can run the ball though, and you should be able to you can run the ball on Duke, with some moderate success, I think. Actually, Northwestern ran, who was it? I missed it. There was a team that ran really well against them, but they shut down the UConn running game. And while you say that's UConn actually has a pretty good running game. They got an O lineman there who's being looked at as an NFL draft pick, All-American. So the Duke front seven, with Dwayne Carter there in the middle, he's pretty stout up front. They got some guys up front. Notre Dame should still be able to run the ball though with their O-line and Audric Estime. Those running backs are good. Sam Hartman is going to make smart decisions, but Riley Leonard's going to make plays too. This is a game I'm staying completely away from. You got the letdown factor. You on the road at a night game, and Wallace Wade, they're showing out because they think they got a squad this year. I'm going to take I was leaning Duke to win to get an upset, but I'm going to take Notre Dame straight up. But I'm telling you guys right now, this is a game that I'm not touching when it comes to against the spread. Hell, I won't even money line this game. I'm not touching this game when it comes to gambling purposes for the weekend, right? Next up, South Carolina, Tennessee. This game opened at Tennessee as a 12.5-point favorite. It's actually going down to 12. People I don't know. Maybe people saw the game with South Carolina last week against Mississippi State. They beat Mississippi State 37-30. High-scoring game. Both Spencer Rattler and Will Rogers went off of that game. So that's like a good and bad. For me, it's good for South Carolina because in their last 2 games, Spencer Rattler has basically had 6 good quarters of quarterbacking. You can't always say that. And that was against Georgia. His first half against Georgia was great. Second half, not so much, but it's Georgia. Okay. You're outgunned. You're outmatched. And then Mississippi State, I mean, I think he went 18 for 20, right? Yeah, he went 18 for 20, 288. And he was hitting stuff downfield. He was going intermediate. This receiver, Xavier Legette, he's actually kind of balled this season a few times already. He's big, fast receiver. He's going to cause some DBs some problems. Those Tennessee DBs definitely going to cause some problems going against him. Tennessee, on the other hand, after the loss of Florida, they went ahead and they went against UT, UT Stephen F. Austin, right? They ran them over. They went up 31-0. There was no hangover. They were up 31-0 at the half. Ran all over them, kind of what you expect. But they haven't had great performances this year, really, other than the opener against UVA, 49-13. Smashed a terrible team, right? South Carolina is better than UVA. Maybe they're better than what I thought. I expect Tennessee to win this game just because they're at home at night. This is going to be another one of those, I'm going to go with the home team at night in the SEC because it's going to be rocking in Knoxville. I think Joe Milton can make plays because I didn't react to the bad about that South Carolina Mississippi State game. Will Rogers cooked you for 400, and y'all know how I feel about Will Rogers. I don't think he's that guy. So Will Rogers cooked you for 400. Joe Milton, who I also feel isn't that great of a quarterback, but he's improved over the years. He's gonna hit you off for some plays too. Brew McCoy and these guys, Josh Heupel's gonna have something cooked up. He's gonna hit you off for some plays. So this isn't a game I'm gonna do because I could see some points being scored by both sides, and maybe you don't cover the 12. But straight up though, I'm taking Tennessee at home. And finally, Washington, Arizona. Washington opened up as an 18-point favorite at home. Or I'm sorry, on the road. Man, this game has gone to 19.5. People got no respect for Arizona, I guess. And, some might say, why would you? That's an erratic football team that's not very good going against what's looking like an absolute juggernaut right now in that Washington Husky offense, with Michael Penix just going crazy, throwing the ball to Roma Dunze and Polk at wide receiver. These guys are just going crazy. They had 700 2 weeks ago against Michigan State, right? They went 529 against Cal. This team, and don't get it twisted. The Washington defense is playing some lights out football. They're hit sticking, right? They're covering, they're making plays. And also, finally, Washington is letting Dylan Johnson get more work at running back. Dylan Johnson transferred from Mississippi State. He's a good player. He's a good running back, and he can really balance out that offense. But with all that said, I want to remind you guys about something that happened 16 years ago in 2007, right? You had an Oregon Duck team ranked number 2 in the country go on the road to Arizona in the desert at night. An Arizona team with a losing record, or an Arizona team that's not very good. And Oregon would come in there with Dennis Dixon, Heisman candidate. Hell, maybe he was the Heisman front runner at that time. I don't know, though. Tebow won that year, so he probably wouldn't have won it. And what happens? Arizona, first off, ends Dennis Dixon's season. He knocked him out for the year. And Arizona pulled off the shocking win at home in the desert at night. Here we go. Top 10 team. Visiting. Heisman hopeful. Visiting. Big favorite. Visiting. Is Arizona going to pull it off again? Probably not, because they're led by Jaden Delora, who I just think is the most erratic quarterback I've ever seen play. He slings it. I'll give him that. He'll hit some yards and he'll hit some plays, but he's going to turn that rock over. I promise you he's going to turn it over a couple times in this game probably, right? 19.5. I'm not going to do that on the road, even though Washington is covered 19 against everybody easily, right? They smashed everybody, and Arizona's probably not as good as some of these teams that they smashed, but I'm just not going to give 19.5 on the road at night. And that little history lesson I just gave you, I'm going to just say, all right, Washington. Sometimes the team's got to sleepwalk in a game. That happens when a really good team sleepwalks in a game. This might be one of those times where they sleepwalk a little. Maybe they don't cover, maybe they do, but I'm not going to risk it for the biscuit, right? And I'm going to go ahead and say Washington straight up in that one. So I'm not going to do the spread in that one. I'm just going to leave that alone. So that wraps it up. So if we recap it, my against the spread picks, some of the it's going to be Syracuse with the 7. I am taking Clemson straight up, but Syracuse with the 7. I'm taking Florida money line. I'm taking Texas A&M laying the 6, so they got 3, right? I'm taking Georgia laying the 14.5. That's 4. And I'm taking LSU laying the 2.5. 5 games. So we're doing 5 against the spread picks. You can see the rest of my picks here on the overall. Hope you guys have a good luck this week if you're doing my picks, And if you guys like the content, please feel free to like, follow, and subscribe. And you're going to see my YouTube handle here in a few seconds. And that's it. Take care.